Hey, this is Greg from Sports Rehab Expert. Today we're going to be talking about youth athlete training, how to create general physical preparedness, and how to better create long-term athletic development programs for our athletes. The message that now gets lost in the uber competitive sports leagues is that short-term results-oriented thinking does not often lead to long-term sport success. I love this car commercial. I forget what actual car they're advertising here, but the dad rips off the participation emblem and he writes with a Sharpie "Champions" on it. I think it's hilarious, but that being said, it brings up a dilemma we see in sports. I think fostering competition at an early age is important. The participation trophy doesn't necessarily accomplish this, but speaking from my personal collegiate experience, being surrounded by athletes good or better than me was when I really personally started to improve. However, this win at all cost concept at a young age can become very detrimental. I think this is where we start seeing why kids specialize in sports so soon. There's a lot that can be learned from a loss, and while we certainly want to instill competition, a short-term win does not always accomplish or stay true to the long-term goals of the athlete down the road. So how did we end up here? I think a lot of the early specialization stems from the Olympics, both from a public perspective, but also where sports performance professionals may have gotten off track a bit. There's numerous books, research articles. They cite the development of gymnasts from a young age to eventually competing in the Olympics. You know, this in my mind is where the start 'em young mentality comes from, and now you see it in just about every sport. However, when you consider gymnasts, their peak competition age, it's a very young age, so early specialization is somewhat needed. Compare this to football, basketball, baseball. You know, peak competition age is probably a good 10 years older. This gives the athlete much more time to be exploring movement at a young age and then specialize later on in their careers when they choose which sport they want to specialize in. That being said, early stages of gymnasts are not as skill specific as people may believe. These athletes spend an enormous amount of time being able to fundamentally move well. You know, what other sports are you balancing, rolling around on the floor, jumping, crawling, twisting, working through full mobility, all within one practice? This sounds exactly like general physical preparedness to me. So then why are gymnasts always getting injured as well? Well, there's obviously going to be a number of reasons, but one of the reasons is they need to peak at a young age. So there's pressure to progress quickly into more specific or more advanced skills, often before they are strong enough to perform these movements. Most are also going through puberty at this time, which only complicates the matters. This is the case where strength training and increasing the athlete's resiliency to stress may be beneficial. But the overlying theme here is that, and what I want you to take away, is that one sports model for athlete development and assuming it's best for all sports is a very dangerous line to be walking. The importance of skill in sport. Skill, obviously, is the ability to do something well. I'm going to propose that the general public and even many strength coaches are looking at the skill of sport wrong. Contrary to public beliefs, elite athletes cannot replicate identical movement patterns after years and years of training. I cite one study here, but there are a multitude of them looking at a variety of sports. Take the jump shot, for example. Steph Curry, widely known as one of the best jump shooters in the game, however, probably unable to replicate identical jump shots. I highlight identical because it may look similar, but it's never exactly alike. At least that's what the research would lead you to start believing. So maybe what we need to be considering is the athlete's ability to deviate from movement. And this brings up the concept of variability. we're going to be talking about two types of variability here. The first is coordinative variability, and that's the amount of variance in sequencing parts together, or the ability to coordinate trunk, hips, knees, ankles in a proper sequence. This type of variability ideally decreases with practice. So when you think about a jump shot again, and practicing it over and over again, the sequencing of events becomes very predictable. The second type of variability, and arguably much more important for elite athletes, is elemental variability. And this is the amount of variance within a global movement due to the infinite amount of strategies or changes in condition during a movement. Having elemental variability allows you to correct for errors, make real-time adjustments, and as the pattern may look consistent, it's never really the exact same thing that happens. What this potentially means for the athlete, and the better the athlete, the more movement options they have to respond to a changing environment and still get the job done. This is important for athletes whose sport is very unpredictable, such as football, basketball, hockey, and in most sports in general. So when creating a long-term athletic development program, one must consider a timeline and the sporting demands. Short of gymnastics, most other sports have a much older peak competition age. Baseball, football, basketball, volleyball, track, you name it. These athletes have the time to expose themselves to a variety of sports. This exposes them to a variety of skills, movements, variability, so that when they finally choose to specialize, there is less of a motor learning curve that's going on. All the while, we want them to be sure that they're still working to develop the necessary strength, movement, and endurance needed for general physical preparedness, so the injury likelihood decreases while playing sports. Then, when we choose to specialize, or the athlete chooses to specialize, they can implement a more focused sports performance workout routine that's tailored more to the physical qualities of that sport with less risk to injury. If the goal is to obtain a college scholarship or to compete professionally, then a long-term approach needs to be taken. That plan means establishing a fundamental base of movements, strength, and endurance to avoid injury and set the athlete up for specialization in the future. The pyramid on the left here is 𝐒𝐫𝐫𝐤𝐨𝐫𝐵's model of athletic development. The pyramid on the right is Greg Cook's hierarchy of function. These two models should be referenced as you create any long-term athletic development program. So one thing I tell athletes is that injuries are the fastest way to become less athletic and become worse at your sport. In order to improve, the athlete must compete in games and practices. If injured, especially at a young age, they lose a lot of valuable exposure. The first goal of an athlete is to develop general physical preparedness. This includes building resiliency to injury, creating movement capacity, and building foundational strength and endurance. These are the foundation building blocks of long-term athletic development. So how does we as strength coaches impact this? Well, one, we've kind of already mentioned it. Encourage a variety of sports to participate in. This way the athlete is exposed to running, jumping, landing, throwing, balancing, tumbling in a variety of environments. These qualities can then be further enhanced in the weight room environment as well. The strength movements that all athletes need to be exposed to are horizontal press, horizontal pull, vertical press, vertical pull, squat, hip hinge, and carry. These are the meat and potatoes of just about every program. When we're in the weight room, we want to start facilitating self-learning, because ultimately we want the athlete to become autonomous and develop mastery in their sport and activity. So this way will help them have the ability to recognize and self-correct a poor movement. In other words, they're just going to know what a good lift feels like. So to do this, we need to start creating feedback loops. This is where exercise selection then becomes imperative. If you take a squat for an example, We choose the goblet squat to first learn the squatting pattern. Because the weight is loaded in the front, it creates an environment of internal cues. In essence, the weight will help the athlete feel an upright torso with the knees coming forward over top the middle toe without ever really having to coach it or say it. This is going to minimize coaching. The athlete can feel what they need to do and they can correctly perform the movement. Then, if needed, the coach will provide an external cue during the lift or feedback on the performance of the lift after the movement is completed. Another example is sprinting. We know joint angles are going to be important to produce maximum amounts of force into the ground. By choosing a sprint variation that puts the athletes in positions to feel these joint angles, they become acclimated to them. So things like pushing and pulling a sled, a rolling or momentum start is something I really like to use. Half kneeling starts, they all help the athlete feel the correct angle the body needs to be in to complete the task at hand. The problem I see in a lot of high school weight rooms is starting right off the bat with barbell deadlifts, back squats, power cleans, without the athlete ever really being exposed to these strength movements before. As a result, their learning curve is going to be greater, less progress is going to be made, and in some cases there's going to be a few of those athletes who are very intimidated by the weight room and don't really want to go to the weight room at all as a result. We want to challenge the athlete to the level of their capabilities and then progress from there. This will vary significantly between the athletes, but the end goal for all my athletes are to perform front squats, barbell deadlifts, bench, overhead press, and plyometrics at some capacity, but I certainly don't start there off the bat. So, in order to make sure the athletes are adequately challenged but still performing lifts that they are fully capable of performing, I personally like to use a prerequisite system. Here's a sample of the prerequisites I use in my Reign Superior Athletics training system that athletes can purchase online. As you'll notice, the requirements fall in line with the primary movements I want them to achieve. When the athlete is first starting out, I have more repetition-based goals as opposed to percentage-based goals. Again, this is going to be to facilitate motor learning and having the basic movement patterns mastered before we really start to load them. So as you can see, we have a goblet squat, 35-pound, 10 repetitions as the goal for the male, and then obviously a little bit lighter for the female. We have a 30-second plank hold, a number of repetitions for an incline push-up. So all mostly repetition-based goals or time-based goals. And then there's going to be some difference obviously between male and female. Then as we get further along, the goals are going to become much more percentage-based, such as 1.5 body weight on the trap bar deadlift for 1 rep. And this is the case for the transitioning to level 4 and level 5 in the program that I've created. So does the implement really matter when we're choosing exercises? What's the goal? So we are trying to enhance the athlete's strength, power, speed, and explosiveness. For strength, obviously multi-joint movements are going to be the best. Get them performing deadlifts. I prefer front squats to back squats, then some sort of row, bench, overhead press, and carry variation. For power, explosiveness, and elastic capabilities, there's a variety of ways to do this. I personally choose not to use Olympic lifts in most cases for youth athlete programs. This is because I feel I can still get the athlete to improve rate of force development and motor unit recruitment with activities such as a speed concentric focused deadlift, a plyometric, and sprinting activities. These activities are much easier for the athlete to learn, and they still get the same results, and if not better. Are there other ways to do this? Sure, but I want to make it as simple, effective, and efficient as possible. And then also, depending on your high school, equipment may be limited as well. It's also important to remember, no matter the exercise, they all can be butchered, but in general, I can progress and regress a plyometric drill as appropriate much easier than Olympic lift and still elicit a very positive training effect. Teaching the power clean takes a lot of time, practice, and if it looks like on the picture on the right, you know, how much is your athlete really improving and at what expense? Again, injuries are the fastest way to make an athlete worse. If the goal of the athlete is purely strength, I'll stick with deadlifts and squats. If I want to work more explosive strength, then I'll start to manipulate bar speed by removing weight down to around 40 to 60%, and I'll start to emphasize the bar speed on the concentric portion of the lift. Again, the goal is to enhance the physical qualities, which would be strength, explosive strength, elastic abilities, speed, etc., necessary to enhance athleticism. The implement used is irrelevant so long as the athlete still gets the necessary stimulus. So sets and reps, I really don't want to get too bogged down here with this, so I'm going to take a little bit more of a general approach. For a beginner, again, is motor control, coordination, and create relative strength of the goals. So reps are going to be higher, focus more on the eccentric lowering to learn the movement. Then as the training age becomes more intermediate, the goal is strength and movement. The goal is going to be strength and movement capacity. So we want to start lowering the reps and increase the number of sets. You know, in general, there's going to be a wide range of sets and reps scheme here. It's going to be, you know, around 3 to 5 sets, 5 to 12 reps is where you're going to be working. Then as the athlete becomes more advanced in their training age, the goal is performance. So rate of force development, maximal strength, explosive strength, and reactivity. You know, you start the day off with a lower number of reps and high volume of sets with main lifts and plyometrics. Then you'll follow this up with a higher rep range for accessory work to still stimulate muscle growth and the hypertrophy. But this higher rep range will take some of the load and stress off the joints by using a lighter weight. So here's something that I don't think gets brought up and talked about enough in youth sports, and that's the idea of growth spurts and how it's going to affect your training. This is a concept stolen from Dave Tilley, and he works with mostly gymnasts, but I think this concept is a good one that people can start applying to the majority of sports to give them an idea of different windows that they need to be careful of their training stimulus, and maybe back off things a little bit to avoid injuries. So just kind of listen in on this one here.
So here's something that I think should be pretty much standard in all gymnastics gyms, not to mention a lot of youth sports. Measuring someone's growth and height on a monthly or bi-monthly basis is something that can help you indicate when someone's really growing rapidly, and that's a time when they're probably at risk for some overuse injuries or things can go wrong because one, they're getting longer at a proportional rate, right, and the brain's trying to adjust for that, but two, the new cartilage that's being laid down is not as strong as the bone that's, you know, solid and matured. So this is something that I started doing last year, and now we're kind of getting a full cycle. And it's helping me to see who's really spiking up at a fast rate and who's not, and I adjust their training based on who's really kind of growing like a weed. So we're going to use Linnea here. So the first thing you do is just have them stand, and you just come in and you look at and see where they are. So right, you take a measure. So she's about 57 inches right here, and then she sits down. So that just shows you their entire height. And then when they sit down, right, now we're taking her legs out of the equation, and we're also going to measure like her torso. So 57 was the first, then I come in right here, and that's 30 and a half right there. So that's a measure of her torso. And the last thing she does is she's going to do her wingspan. So stand up for me. She puts one finger over here at the number 1. And then she reaches flat as far as she can. And we measure this one too. So she's got about 56 here. So we have 57, her 30-something and a half, I think it was. I would write them down. And then we also get a width measurement of her wingspan. So we see her leg growth, and we see her trunk growth. And we also see if her arms are growing, right? So then we'll come over here, and we come this way, and we have a track. We track all stuff, conditioning, strength, our year, but over here is where we have a corner, And every first of the month they come in and they track this. So we take someone that says 58, 59 and 1 and 59 and a half. So someone who's growing, we see month to month, you know, where they're going. This is January from the last year, but we had a whole year before this that they did. So very easy to track, and you can do this, but all you need is a simple growth chart, something that says maybe 70 tape and 80 high, but you can easily track this across months, and especially with our little ones who are level 3s, level 4s, level 5s, if they grow really fast, you got to be kind of looking out for things to go wrong quick.
So I really like this idea, and I think it should be implemented in a lot of different youth programs, because the idea, we still want to load and train movement at some capacity, but we just need to pay special attention to the frequency when they're growing through these rapid growth periods. And this is an easy way of monitoring, and putting up a vertical and horizontal measures on the wall doesn't take much time. So the next concept we're going to be talking about is force absorption and deceleration training. Just as important as the ability to produce power, if you're going to have a lot of power output, you better have something to put the brakes on to go along with it. Learning proper deceleration mechanics will again be useful in the coordination and motor learning of the athlete. But on the performance side of things, it's going to help the athlete's ability to change direction and better enhance the use of the stretch reflex. And from a rehab standpoint, it's going to have a better impact on injury prevention as well. You know, everybody thinks of the drop step landing from a plyo box, either landing on bilateral legs or a single leg, as the top deceleration drill or exercise. Got a picture up in the right hand corner here. You know, obviously we're trying to control the amount of valgus collapse at the knee and teach good hip glute dominant force absorption strategies. And the drop step landing from a box is a great exercise to do this. But in reality, there's also there's so many different variations you could be coming up with. So here's a few examples of some low-level deceleration drills I like to use.
This is a submaximal exercise done at speeds that you can control with maximal effort on the landing. Think about soft feet, landing as soft as you can, contacting the ground with your whole foot, and landing with a soft knee, controlling the knee, making sure that it doesn't waver side to side.
Okay, and then here's an example of a more advanced drill. You know, eventually as the athlete gets good at these, they can be easily included as part of your warm-up routine as well.
Submaximal exercise done at speeds you can control with maximal effort on the landing. You're going to take a shuffle step into a jump and rotate, landing on your foot, controlling the landing, not allowing the knee to waver side to side. Your whole foot should contact the ground at the same time, minimizing the noise that you hear on landing.
Yeah, and I really like these different types of drills because it exposes the athlete to a bunch of different environments. Because we know that, you know, there's going to be a lot of different scenarios that they're going to encounter, that they're going to have to show the ability and demonstrate the ability to decelerate and then again accelerate. So last but not least, I want to touch on warm-ups. And for whatever reason, warm-ups seem to get no love until the athlete either becomes older and has more difficulty bouncing back from workout after workout, or unfortunately they become injured. This is the problem. This problem is that it's a very reactive model and something that should be more proactive. Here is why your athletes hate it. There's no perceived purpose to in the short term. There's no purpose that the athlete perceives. They're boring and they take too long. So your warm-up should be anything but this. You as a coach need to emphasize that their workouts today will be enhanced by their warm-up. It will allow them to compete at a higher level, or if they're in the weight room, it's going to allow them to lift more weight That way it gives them a short-term benefit for doing that. And the warm-up should be challenging for the individual as well too. You know, it should get their heart rate up, it should stimulate the nervous system to start firing rapidly. If you don't do these things, the warm-up really is essentially useless. And then lastly, they take too long. In some of these programs, they could be 5 to 8 minutes is all that's really needed to adequately warm up prior to a lifting session. If you're spending all this time rolling around in a foam roll or stretching, you're wasting the athlete's time. Again, they'll not do this continually throughout the day and day in and day out when their workouts come up or when their competition comes out. So you need to create a movement-based warm-up that's efficient. It stimulates the nervous system, gets the heart rate up, prepares them for the activity at hand, and it gives them and make sure they understand the short-term benefits that come out of it, whether it's performance or it's in the practice or the competition, or if it's just lifting more weight that day. Give them a short-term gain. So I mentioned it briefly, but I have a training program available for athletes and coaches to order online. It consists of 5 levels, which you saw earlier, to help make sure your athletes are doing the correct lifts and the correct lifts at the right times, and it has a long-term goal that's in mind. It currently contains 15 different workouts through these 5 different levels. There's a video database of each exercise. On every workout log, there's a link to these exercises. It also includes a warm-up routine that advances throughout the 5 levels, that is efficient so the athlete will actually perform them. And it's simple, it's downloadable, so the athlete can put it on their phone, take it with them into the weight room, and again, there's links that they can click on that takes them right to videos to show them how to perform them as well too. So in closing, I hope you were able to get something out of this presentation and it provokes some thought as you develop athlete programs with a long-term mindset. I appreciate your time and allowing me to talk on this topic.